to my channel. I'm Veronica with NurturingConnectionsHomeschool.com, where I share resources, tips, and planners to help you connect with what matters most. Now today's video is going to be about math. I'm going to be sharing with you some key components of RightStart Math, Math UC, and math lessons for living education. So we're going to look at some of the key components. We're going to look at some of the pros and cons, and then just share some general ideas on math and what to look for when looking for a math curriculum. Now, when I share pros and cons, I want to be very, very intentional about keeping in mind that what may be a pro for my family may not necessarily be a pro for your family, and vice versa. So keep that in mind. You want to always look at your unique situation, the unique needs of your learners and you yourself, in order to find a curriculum that best suits those needs and helps your children grow in the area of mathematics. Now, early on in our journey, we did start with RightStart Math. So we've kind of been through a number of curricula. I did have a child that struggled with math, and I kind of flipped it the other way. We had two that struggled and one that loves math. So we had to try some different things in order to find what worked for us. And because we've tried those things, I have some pieces of them left, and I thought I'd share them with you in hopes that it could help you find something that may work for your family. Now, the first one we did along the way was RightStart Math. And so when you look at RightStart Math, the first level is level A. So it goes levels A, B, C, D, E, F, and possibly G. And you'll notice it comes with a worksheet booklet. These are the worksheets. You'll notice it's very different than a traditional math workbook. So this is the worksheets. It comes with a teacher manual, which looks like this. And it has each lesson. You can see here lesson 4, for example, gives you the breakdown of what to do, some extra explanations, and then it continues on from there. And most of the lessons in RightStart Math are very, very engaging, very, very hands-on. There isn't always a worksheet for them, especially at this level. The reason for that is because a lot of kids still aren't able to write at this point proficiently, and so they wanted to give them the opportunity to advance in that skill prior to jumping into that, but still teaching them math along the way. This particular level came with a book called Yellow is the Sun, and it teaches them how to use their fingers to count, and of course it kind of coincides that with tally sticks, and then what that looks like on the abacus, and then the visual representation. It does have an appendix as well with a number of different games. And then it recommends or requires the purchase of a manipulative kit. So this manipulative kit is about $200 worth of manipulatives. It includes everything from like the abacus to these little manipulatives. It has this scale where if you put, for example, 2 and 2, they're equal, and so you can visually see that. You can add, for example, 2 plus 6, and on this side it would be 8 to balance it out. Number of ways of using this. It was fun. We have a geo board. We have these little plastic numbers for place value. It came with cards and games. So a number of things come in this kit. It is pricey, but it is something that they use year after year after year. So if you're willing to commit to the curriculum, then it is an investment that they will be using throughout the years. Now, some of the pros of RightStart Math is that it's highly engaging. The kids loved it when we did this. It changes things up. There's a lot of novelty there for the brain to just get engaged and focus on these new ideas. And it's really, really effective because they see it in different contexts, like I showed you in that book. They're doing it with their fingers. They're using popsicle sticks. They're using the abacus. And so all these things are coming together so that they can make those connections and understand those mathematical concepts more efficiently. Like I mentioned, there's games, there's reviews built in, but where that may be a great, great pro, for some, it could also turn into a con. And for that was one of the reasons that for us, we had to kind of shift gears a little bit when I had more children homeschooling along the way. The thing about RightStart Math is it is very, very teacher directed, teacher centered. You are required to be by your student for these lessons so that they can engage and interact with you. So it's not something that you can just give them a worksheet and go and sit and do, or let me teach you the lesson for 5 minutes and go and work on these particular pages. This is something that is more hands-on, so it's going to require that time from you in order for your child to practice those concepts, since there aren't very many worksheets involved. Like I said, for level A, this is the worksheet. This is the workbook. This is it. So all the practices are done through these games and through these activities that they set up. Now there's also a game handout like this that takes you through all of these different games, and those games are used year after year after year as well. Another possible con is that it is very expensive up front. And so for a lot of homeschool families, this may be something that may prevent you from getting this. It may be something that you save up for if you feel like this is really going to be a good fit for your family. But of course, it is something to consider, because once you dive in with this huge investment, then you'll have to, you may feel that pressure to stick with it in order to get your return back. Now in our case, we did switch gears, but we still kept our manipulatives. I found these extremely helpful. Because I had gone through this with a couple of my children, I could use these manipulatives as needed when another math curricula was lacking or a child needed a little bit more support. I could just pick and choose and use them as needed. And so I've really enjoyed these manipulatives and continue to find value in them to this day. Another possible con, it does have a different scope and sequence, and so it's not going to align with a lot of more traditional math curricula out there. They don't do things like counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This starts off with what's called subitizing. I hope I'm saying that right. Where a child just looks at 3 items and can grab those 3 and know those are 3 items without having to do 1, 2, 3. So it's not traditional in that sense. There are a lot of different things that for me personally, I didn't understand why I was doing what I was doing. And so it kind of frightened me along the way. I'm like, why are we doing this? This doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I was used to traditional math, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're doing little dots to add and so forth. This is not like that. So if you want something more traditional, this may not be a good fit for your family. But if you're willing to expand your horizons a bit and see math in a different light, it is highly effective in that sense. As I worked my way through and I could start seeing those connections, there were many, many times that I'd stop and say, wow, that was pretty amazing. I never would have thought of it that way. And it was just really, really meaningful. So RightStart Math is a great, great curriculum. But again, you'll have to determine whether or not the cost is appropriate for your family and or the time that you will need to invest in it, and whether or not you're okay with your child not having that many worksheets in their curriculum. So that's the first one. The second one I wanted to share with you is Math-U-See. So Math-U-See has a few different components to it. It has a student pack, which includes the workbook, and as you can see, this is a lot of worksheets compared to the other one. And then it has an assessment booklet or your tests. And then it has the teacher pack, which includes a textbook, and then a DVD or online access to videos, lesson videos, and extra practices as well. So took some notes here. I want to make sure I cover everything. Now, Math-U-See, a few of what you may consider pros is it does have a mastery approach. So you're going to target one area and you're going to hit it over and over and over again until that particular concept is mastered. Now, what it does have in there is built-in review. So even though they're mastering this one concept, they're still spiraling through previous concepts that were taught. So that does help to balance that quite a bit. Math-U-See also has video lessons. So Mr. Demi does a great job of modeling everything on a whiteboard. He has a classroom of students in front of him, and so the students get to see that engagement and interaction between the teacher and the students and how those lessons are being taught. And then it has a textbook where if you're still struggling with providing that instruction, or if there's any confusion, you can open up that textbook and follow along, and it breaks that down for you further. So the textbook is more for you as an extra resource, but it's something that you could share with your student as needed. Another piece that's included in here are enrichment practices. So after those systematic reviews, there's more of a real world application that you can choose to do or not do in here. And then if this isn't enough practice, they do have targeted worksheets that you can create online through the digital pack, where you can create specific practices in one particular area or two or however you want in order to fill any possible gaps along the way. So this is what it looks like. It is no fluff. There is no color in here. It is just math problems all the way through. It's aligned. Oh, that's another thing, is RightStart is not aligned through high school, but Math-UC is. So it goes all the way through. And so you'll see that they're already introducing some algebra concepts here. You will have 6n equals 24. What is the value of n? And so they're teaching them that at this particular level, so that when they do get to algebra, they are familiar with these ideas and are able to do it more thoroughly and effectively. Now, what some may consider a con about Math-UC, it too is an investment up front. It is pretty pricey. They do require the purchase of manipulatives as well. So let me grab those. What Math-UC uses are these blocks. Oh, there it is. So these run about $85 or so, and it comes with a poster, and this is more for place value and just understanding the different concepts, but everything is taught using these particular blocks. So that's an investment up front. Again, even though we may use it or not, we've always used the blocks anyway. I've still kind of worked those in for different demonstrations. But once that investment is made, then each year you will purchase the teacher pack and student pack. And then once, if you have a second student, then you would just need the student pack after that. What else? Because another possible con is because it only teaches one thing at a time, it has a completely different sequence than most traditional math programs as well, just kind of like RightStart Math. So for example, in Gamma, you are just doing multiplication all year long. And so for some children, that may get boring. For some children, it just may seem like more of the same thing. But they are integrating a number of different things in here. You're seeing how these concepts are connected and so forth. So there is some value to this. But again, you're going to get a whole year of addition, a whole year of subtraction, a whole year of multiplication, a whole year of division, and so forth, and on it goes. So where this may be a problem is if your child transfers into a different math curriculum or into a different school setting, then they may find there quite a bit of significant gaps because they didn't get that traditional scope and sequence. Now, if you stick with it, I've read and heard that your child will have a stronger foundation in math in the later years as that foundation has been built over those years. So just something to consider if this isn't something you plan on doing long term. Another possible con for me were the explanations. Some of these explanations were very different than what I understood and how I was taught math. And so it confused me sometimes, and it made it more challenging for me to be able to help my children sometimes. So like in multiplication, for example, I'd always carry that on the top and he carries it at the bottom. Those little shifts, those little differences really threw me off personally, so I wasn't able to help my child as easily. I'd have to really go into that textbook and see, okay, how do you do that again, and try to relearn everything that I already knew about multiplication. So just some things to consider. There are some differences here, but again, it is aligned. There is that consistency all the way through. There's extra practices if you need them. And so it's a curriculum that's very, very solid and something that can easily be adjusted or customized based on the specific needs of your family. Now, the last one I'm going to share with you today is Math Lessons for a Living Education. So Math Lessons for a Living Education is just this workbook. This is all there is to it. So it's very, very affordable, and that's something that is definitely, could definitely be a pro for your family. It's a very gentle approach. It's based on Charlotte Mason's ideas of education. And so it introduces each lesson with a story. Let me kind of pull this in here. At the beginning of each week, you have a little story to read. And there it is. So you have a story to read with these characters. And then based on that story, then the lessons ensue, often using some of those real world applications, which are really, really valuable. You have your answer key in the back, so you don't need another teacher guide. It also has an appendix back there, so you can make some copies along the way. Everything is built in here, so the only additional manipulatives you need are beans. And so basically you take this out of the book, you can laminate this like we've done here. And the way that they teach place value, for example, is with kidney beans. We counted them in the one house, and then they were bagged in little Ziploc bags when they moved on to the next house, and so forth. So everything is using more like household items so that you don't have to make a huge expense up front. I really liked the explanations in here. This is a little bit more traditional, so I could wrap my mind around it. It wasn't so different than what I was used to, so I appreciated that as well. Some examples, for example, were like gallon man, and so it was this big old gallon with arms and legs, and those were the quarts, and then it went into the pints. And so just that visual piece was really helpful. There's some hands-on pieces in here, things that we did together. There was review built into it, that it kind of teaches you as you go. So everything, like I said, is already here. You don't have a separate manual. It gives you the instruction as you're reading through the lesson. So you'll have your instruction page, and then you'll have your practices after that. It's built into to do 5 lessons a week, and so you just do a page or 2, sometimes 3 every single day. And it has narrations as well, where the child is telling you what they've learned, what steps they're doing, and why. There's copy work in there as well. So again, very Charlotte Mason focused. Now, the cons that we found with this is because it was so gentle, it was wonderful, and it really met the needs of my children who are struggling, but it did not provide enough practice. And so because it did not provide enough practice, some of these concepts didn't stick. And so it has them, for example, making their own flashcards, and then it'll just say practice flashcards. And so if you can skip that and you keep moving on to the practices, you're gonna miss a huge part of this curriculum. So you wanna make sure that you're targeting those flashcards. You want to make sure that you're getting those practices in. And so in those cases, it may also be beneficial to purchase pre-made flashcards that are ready to go each and every time. One thing that this curriculum did do that would make it a little more expensive, but they do offer a second workbook that looks almost exactly the same, called Practice Makes Perfect. And it has additional practices in there, more hands-on activities in there that you can use as a supplement to this curriculum if your child needs that extra practice. So something to keep in mind. They did resolve that issue. I believe maybe they had enough feedback on that and wanted to be able to provide that as a resource as well. Some of our cons was it's not aligned past the 6th grade, so you would have to switch gears when you get into the upper grades. Like I said, we had to get those additional practices in because they didn't have the Practice Makes Perfect workbooks at the time that we were going through this series. In some cases, my kids found the stories not as enjoyable as we wanted them to be. When you have 3 kids doing it, it wasn't something that we could, okay, let's stop and read. We had a lot of other things that we were reading, and we just wanted to get to the math part of it. So everybody has their opinion on that. Again, what can be our con, maybe your pro, and so just something to keep in mind and think about as you're making that decision. But it's a really solid curriculum. It does have a lot of good reviews. If you go to Master Books, I'll link it below. I mean, you can read what other people have said about it. It is solid and gentle. And if your child is struggling, then this may be a really effective curriculum to use. Again, just providing that additional support as is necessary. Now, that is the kind of breakdown of all this. What I also wanted to share is, if you take a look at my bucket planner, you'll notice in it, there are some math key ideas in there. And so something to also keep in mind if you're switching gears between curricula is that the concepts stay the same. Their understanding of telling time is the same, measurement, addition, multiplication, all those things that they are required to know before algebra to establish that foundation is the same. And so if you find your child struggling or stuck in one particular curriculum, it's not always the best time to just go and dump it and switch. That's something I've learned along the way. You can always just get cheaper workbooks like this on at local stores or online and just fill in that gap. Just work on that one area. If they're struggling with multiplication facts, just target that for a few months, get them back on track and keep on going. But if you're checking off the boxes like this, if you're looking at their progress and you're tracking that, then you don't have to be confined to one curriculum. You can kind of piece it together based on the needs of your child. So something else to think about in that sense. And the last thing I want to leave you with is just something I pulled out of Education, Does God Have an Opinion? But sometimes for some of our students, math can be a really, really challenging subject for them to overcome. And so it's important to get to the root of why we're doing what we do. And it reads here, math is a means whereby we can think God's thoughts after him. It gives us a logical basis for all other areas of study, and it helps students to develop abstract, critical thinking skills. When students can recognize and predict patterns, they can then understand the basis for music theory and other disciplines as well. And basically reminding our children that math points us to God. It shows us his greatness. The existence of mathematics is one of the strongest evidences for the existence of God. And I really like what this book has done to just help me grasp that bigger picture of what math is. It's not something that we came up with. It's what we discovered about him and his world and his creation that is just so amazing. That as we learn these mathematical concepts, we see that he is a God of order and he has ordered everything in this universe and in the way that he chose to do so. And as we learn about it, we can learn more about him as well. And so keeping that in mind, there's an attack even on mathematics nowadays where they're saying there is no absolute. There are no absolutes, but the truth is there is. There is right and there is wrong. There is no, it's almost right or it's almost, there is a definite line there that God has put in place in his universe to give us that clarity that we need as we work through each day, seeing these mathematical concepts come to life all around us. And then some days, when those days are really difficult, sometimes we just pray. And like I tell my children today, I am not necessarily teaching you math. You're going to learn that as an added bonus. But today I'm going to teach you how to overcome when things get hard. And so we pray through some of those lessons and we just see God's faithfulness coming alongside us as we overcome those struggles, as we overcome those challenges, and as we grow in our thinking abilities and abstract thinking abilities to better understand the world around us. So I hope that's encouraging to you. If you've used any of these curricula before, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please drop them below so that others can use that as a resource and reference as well. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Appreciate you stopping by. Thanks so much. Please like and subscribe on your way out, and I'll see you next time.